Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to all of the paying members of my Patreon channel. Your support is needed, and without you, none of this is possible. I also want to give a special shout out to Daddy Dame for the $20 donation.
My man.
And if you'd like to support the channel directly, Cash App and PayPal are available. Just be sure to let me know in the For section if it's okay for me to thank you publicly, or else I'll assume you'll want to remain anonymous.
And here we go.
Layman's Journal Chapter 243. Donald Trump winning the 2024 election was a surprise for many, but not for me. Because like most Americans, I don't get my news from legacy media sources. I get my news and political analysis from social media, on platforms like YouTube. And at no point did I see any groundswell for Kamala Harris, especially amongst young men. And speaking of young men, for decades they've been neglected by the Democrat Party.
Young women today are making strides in economic equality, earning more college degrees than men and serving more often as their family's primary breadwinner. Men, on the other hand, are working less. Many are living without a spouse or a partner. Look, that our young men today are struggling in comparison to young women, it's borne out in the data, raising the question of whether it's time for a targeted intervention. Consider that at the Democratic Party website, there's a list under the heading, Who We Serve, of 16 different demographic groups. They include African Americans, the faith community, LGBTQ plus community, rural Americans, and women, but not men.
So I knew at some point, the boomer generation, which have been loyal to Democrats for the past 50 years, would eventually age out, and a new generation of male voters that weren't bound by tradition would eventually replace them. And they did. Not only did Kamala Harris lose every swing state, but she struggled holding on to New York and New Jersey, states that have traditionally been Democrat strongholds. And it was all due to the gains that Donald Trump made amongst the youth. In fact, Trump improved in every key demographic except boomers. Even labor unions soured on Harris.
So we give 16 questions, 2 weeks in advance, the same 16 questions to each candidate. So, RFK answered all 16 questions. Probably most of them didn't answer them how we would like them to answer them, but they answered them. Donald Trump answered all 16. Around June or May, one of my vice presidents, a woman named Joan Corey out of my local, she sits on our general executive board, was at an event, Vice President Harris. They're going through the line to get the picture, and Joan introduces herself to Vice President Harris, says, I'm Joan Corey, I'm on the general executive board for the Teamsters. She goes, Teamsters? You better get on board. You better get on board. Better get on board soon. Says it to my vice president.
To her face?
To her face. So she comes back, we have the meeting the next day.
Damn.
And she tells me this.
I thought I was arrogant. That's really arrogant.
So she tells me this. Like, if I want to support from any organization, I am not going to point my finger in someone's face and say, you better get on board or else. So fast forward, she finally agrees to come. Same format, same questions. Rank and file members are asking her questions just like they asked every other candidate. And they were trying to negotiate with us. She only wants to answer 3 questions. We're like, there's 16 questions here. So she answers 3 of them. And on the 4th question, one of her operatives or one of her staff slips a note in front of me, this will be the last question. And it was 20 minutes earlier than the time that it was going to end.
Come on.
100%. And her declaration on the way out was, I'm going to win with you or without you.
So after all of that, I was surprised to hear that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, members of Trump's incoming administration, essentially say that Americans are lazy and complicit with mediocrity, and we need H-1B visas to compensate for our poor work ethics, which is a radically stupid thing to say, given the way the election went. And we're going to talk about it. So, let's get it. This issue really hits home for me because I'm a STEM guy. I'm a certified IT professional, and I've seen firsthand how H-1B visas have negatively impacted my career field as far as opportunities and pay, but also as a black man. Because one of the things that we often talk about in these man spaces of social media is DEI culture, and how black people, black men, were made the poster children for DEI, but never seem to benefit from it, because the biggest benefactors of DEI have been white women, then women of color, and after women of color, members of the alternative lifestyle community. But we as black men, even though we are used to push the agenda, have never reaped the reward of it. And for that reason, it frustrates me as a male, because I'm at a disadvantage for certain jobs, just because of DEI. And when you add on H-1B visas, makes the situation even worse. And that's why so many men voted for Trump, because they thought he'd put a stop to all of that. Which is also why Vivek and Elon's comments were so stupid, because men didn't vote for this. Trump won by appealing to young working class voters, young working class male voters, who were already locked out of a jobs market that favors women in foreign labor. So none of the men that voted for Trump voted for job insecurity. They didn't hand out flyers, donate money to his campaign, alienate themselves from friends and liberal relatives for their jobs to be challenged and taken away from them. I don't recall any of them saying,
I can't wait until Trump gets in office so I can lose my job.
Or,
I voted MAGA because I wanted my wages depressed so I could have the privilege of earning less money to continue struggling to support my family.
And that part where Vivek says, our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence. First of all, saying our American culture while advocating for outsiders to take American jobs is nasty work. But I like this tweet from Anthony Brian Logan, which says,
The H-1B visa debate reminds me of the issue with illegal immigrant labor building homes. The argument is that they do jobs that Americans don't want to do, when in reality, they do jobs for far below the price Americans can afford to be paid.
And I agree with that. This isn't about Americans being lazy or obsessed with mediocrity. This is about what I alluded to earlier. Large corporations like Elon Musk's X wanting cheap STEM workers. But instead of being honest about what they really want, they'd rather insult us, tell us they need outsiders because we aren't good enough to work for them. But they're still here. They're still in America. Vivek Ramaswamy's parents didn't migrate to South Africa, and Elon Musk didn't build his company in India. They both came to America, the country with all the lazy, mediocre workers, the way they tell it. So to argue that working-aged men in America are mediocre, when those men are the reason why they're even here, because they're the men who made this country great, is a lie and an insult. But another thing that bothers me is how Trump has been so quiet on the issue. This thing has been all over the news and social media, and Trump, who typically struggles to keep his mouth shut, has suddenly found the mute button. And I think in large part it has to do with these comments.
It's so sad when we lose people from Harvard, MIT, from the greatest schools, and lesser schools that are phenomenal schools also. And what I wanted to do, and I would have done this, but then we had to solve the COVID problem because that came in and, sort of dominated for a little while, as you perhaps know. But what I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country. And you know more stories than I do, but I know of stories where people graduated from a top college or from a college and they desperately wanted to stay here. They had a plan for a company, a concept, and they can't. They go back to India, they go back to China, they do the same basic company in those places, and they become multi-billionaires employing thousands and thousands of people, and it could have been done here. And a bigger example is you need a pool of people to work for your companies. You have great companies, and they have to be smart people. Not everybody can be less than smart. You need brilliant people. And we force the brilliant people, the people that graduate from college, the people that are number one in their class from the best colleges, you have to be able to recruit these people and keep the people. It was such a big deal. Somebody graduates at the top of the class, they can't even make a deal with the company because they don't think they're going to be able to stay in the country. That is going to end on day one.
So it's clear, he's bought into the bullshit. Now I haven't researched this myself, but people have alleged he's in the back pocket of the tech companies. Again, that's just conjecture, but the evidence is damning. Now I know some of you are watching this video and you're disappointed, thinking, I thought Layman was diehard MAGA, but now you're probably thinking I'm a member of the K-Hive. But to be honest, I'm a political nomad. Socially, I lean conservative, but I'm an advocate for men, black men, and family issues, because I believe that the foundations of a strong society rest on the shoulders of strong men, and that you can't have a community without family, and you can't have family without men. So I'm for the empowerment of men, and part of the empowerment of men is making sure they have jobs, that they aren't being undercut in the labor market. That's why I'm talking about this issue, because DEI isn't the only threat to our livelihoods. But getting back to Trump, he needs to make a series of strong statements separating himself from this nonsense. He needs to take a political stance against cheap foreign labor and advocate for American workers. And when it comes to Ramaswamy, specifically, he needs to give him a swift kick in the ass, because people hated him more than Nikki Haley in the primary, and she was awful. So there's no reason to be associated with him. He gains nothing from it politically, especially after those comments, because he's losing political capital over this. And if he lets it go unchecked, he'll accomplish nothing in his second term. So I'm going to let those be my final thoughts on the issue, but before I go, I have a new video on my Patreon channel. It's an extensive breakdown of the film Speak No Evil, where I discuss the way Hollywood pathologizes masculinity in men. Here's a preview. Layman's Journal Chapter 241. So we're 10 years into this woke DEI-inspired era of movie making, and one of the most common tropes in this new era is the way Hollywood demonizes masculinity in men. And what I mean is, masculinity in Hollywood isn't bad if it's expressed through a woman. It's only when it appears in men that it becomes toxic. And the way they do that is by creating female protagonists with masculine traits, who are in direct conflict with masculine antagonists who are evil. So she'll be courageous, strong, virtuous, outspoken, morally uncompromised, and beyond reproach. She'll have all the attributes of a god or an ideal leader, while the male antagonist, on the other hand, will be mean, verbally and physically abusive, sexually aggressive, impulsive, bloodthirsty, filled with uncontrollable rage, domineering, and intimidating. And it's all in an effort to convince the audience that men who are strong, assertive, lead women, or refuse to be led by women are dangerous. And examples would be Mr. from The Color Purple or General Oba from The Woman King. These men symbolize the patriarchy and the oppression of women. But these movies aren't a complete war on gender. The female protagonist will also have a male sidekick to be her feminine counterpart, and he'll be weak, indecisive, vulnerable, sensitive, buffoonish, and sexless, meaning she'll treat him like a little brother or pet, something she won't see as a romantic partner. And his purpose is to be the yin to her yang, and magnify her greatness by contrast, meaning in every area that he fails, she will succeed. So if he's weak, she's strong. If he's dumb, she's smart. If he's a coward, she's courageous. And if she's the leader, he's the follower. So he's also there to submit to her, as he represents role reversal, which is Hollywood's definition of a real man. And you see this in projects like Echo, Miss Marvel, and Blue-Eyed Samurai, all of which feature female heroes with dumb male sidekicks. But if there's one movie that encapsulates this perfectly, it's Speak No Evil, the American remake of the Danish film that came out 2 years ago of the same name. And on the surface, it's your standard psychological thriller horror movie. It's the story of a weak man who repeatedly fails to protect his family while on vacation in a remote area on the English countryside. So be sure to check that out. It's some of my best work. And with that said, I'm going to close things right here, but before I go, please be sure to check out the rest of the videos in my library, as I'm sure there's something there you'll enjoy. And if you like this video, please share the link on your social media platforms. I cannot stress enough how far that goes into helping me grow the channel. And that's it. That's all I have to say about it. What do you have to say about it? Leave a comment in the comment section and let's have a conversation.
How am I spending my Friday? Some jerk chicken with rice seasoned, red beans, and some bread. Got some red wine over here. And I'm watching Layman's Journal on YouTube. Shout out to the brother Layman. Check him out. I'll leave the link in the description. It's your boy Calvin King. And this is how I'm enjoying my Friday.